I'm here today with Sarah, who is something to do with the Torch Trust. We'll get into that in a minute. We'll get into her life in a minute. But first of all, hello, Sarah.
Hi, nice to be here.
How is your day treating you so far?
Yeah, well, today it is a rainy summer's day. So between that and tech playing me up, it's not the best summer, but it's a good day all the same.
So, rain, and yes, that's a typical British summer's day, really, isn't it?
Yeah. What else
Because,
would we talk about?
well, this is the thing. People say, "Oh, British, why do you're always talking about the weather?" Yes, you don't understand why it gets so exciting.
Yeah, because it's different topic every day.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So, for those who don't know about Torch Trust, just give us a bit of an overview. What is Torch Trust all about?
Yeah, so Torch Trust was founded in the 1950s by a couple who accidentally happened to have a blind girl come to their Bible study for young people. And they then suddenly realised that it's really hard to be blind and to engage with things the same as your peers. And so that's the roots of Torch. And so we want to be an organisation where people who are blind or partially sighted have the opportunity to encounter Jesus and to grow in their Christian faith and to thrive in Christian community. So we want people to know that there's somewhere they belong, and there's somewhere where there are people who have been through what they're going through, maybe a little bit slightly further ahead on the path. And we believe that Jesus is the one who can give hope in the midst of trauma, and sight loss is a massive trauma. So regardless of what people believe, we're open and we want people to come and to find support. But we're also unashamedly a Christian-based organisation. So that's why we do what we do, but we'll welcome anybody regardless of belief.
I love how I hear this so many times with ministries. I just think, oh, I like this. And then I find out why. So it started because there was a need. And someone said, how do we meet this need? Okay, there's someone who's blind or partially sighted. And well, how do we help them engage in what we're doing? Well, we can't as we are. So let's adapt and change to who they are to enable them to become part of what we do. I love stories that begin with, we met someone with a need, because when you look at the Bible, that's exactly what Jesus did. And it so often he met the need first.
Yeah, completely. And it's incredible, isn't it? If you see the need and you adapt, it's amazing what can grow out of it. I really doubt that Ron and Stella, when they were first welcoming this girl into their Bible study, would have seen that we would still be doing things based on their actions, nearly 70 years later. And yet, here we are.
What a legacy.
Mm.
That's a legacy. I actually spoke with a friend of mine. Her name's Rachel. She actually does sign language. She went to university and was doing one course, switched to sign language fully. So now that's what she does. But she was talking about how her interest developed because someone came to her church who she couldn't communicate with because they were, I think, was it blind or partially sighted? It doesn't really matter. It was the point that she couldn't communicate. So very similar to the story you were sharing of the beginning of Torch Trust. How do I communicate with this person? Because my usual method isn't going to work. So what else do I do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, completely.
Cool. So what's Torch Trust doing today? You talked about the beginnings of it. What are you actually involved in today that people can think, oh, let me get hold of Torch Trust because they can help me?
Yeah, so we have lots and lots of accessible Christian literature. So if there is a Christian book that has been published that is inaccessible in its published form, so normally just a standard book, if that is inaccessible to somebody, then we will transcribe that and provide it in a format that is accessible to them. So that could be large print. We offer 3 different large print options. It could be an audio recording of it, or it could be braille, depending on the person and what their particular need is. We're able to do that. So if anyone listening is saying, I really want to read this book, but I can't get hold of it, well, contact us because we're able to transcribe it and to get it done in a way that works for them. Because we want everything that is accessible to those of us with sight to be accessible to those who haven't. And so that's that's a large part of what we do, and that includes things like daily Bible reading notes. We publish those. So again, they can be reading the same ones as sighted people are on the same day, so they're up to date. And another thing that we do is holidays. So I guess you can probably imagine that going on holiday as a blind and partially sighted person can feel quite overwhelming. I'm amazed at how well people seem to know the way around their homes and how they can do things and how they've adapted. But in a new place that isn't necessarily set up for someone with sight loss, that's really intimidating. So we run holidays to different places where we have morning Bible devotions, we go on trips, we play games, and we do times of prayer together. A community holiday that is geared specifically for people with sight loss, so they're available throughout the summer. We also are involved in a radio station that goes out on RNIB's radio. So again, just giving little hints of hope to people who are experiencing sight loss, and so much more that I've probably forgotten in the moment. But anything to do with helping people with sight loss access things that Christian sighted people can. I mean, the Bible, again, it's a big one I forgot. So we're currently just finished transcribing the latest version of the NIV into the newest braille code. So that is going to be available very shortly for people to get hold of.
Just words are always important. Just describe braille, because braille to me, I immediately think, oh, it's dots on a page, which is probably not the best description of it. Could you just give me a slightly better version than my explanation of braille?
Yeah, well, the thing that I've learnt most is we don't print braille, we emboss braille. I still call it print, but it's not, it's emboss. So it is basically 6 dots that are raised up in different formats. So it's possible to read braille with your eyes, because once you know what each of the dots mean, you can decode it. And in fact, a braille reading person said to me a couple of weeks ago that we have it easy as braille readers because we've only got 6 dots to learn. You sighted people have got lots and lots of little squiggles that can mean anything, which I thought was a kind of really positive way of thinking it. But also, it is basically that it's just a code of six dots, which is read primarily with fingertips. If you haven't learnt it as a child, it can be incredibly difficult to learn as an adult. They're, I believe, not impossible, but trickier because we don't have the same sensitivity in our fingertips.
I see that. I love learning. I didn't know it was 6 dots. I thought it was in my brain. I thought it was somehow 26 letters of the alphabet converted into a dot formula. But that's actually quite cool.
It is. I mean, think of a die. The 6 on a dice. It's kind of like that. That's kind of the 6, how they're laid out, and then they're just raised into different. Each one raised in a different way means a different letter.
You mentioned a minute ago there's a new braille code. Is it sort of an updated version? Do people have to then relearn braille again?
Yeah, so braille is fascinating. I found it absolutely fascinating to get to grips with, and I am not an expert. But in the same way that our computers and laptops need updating from time to time, braille gets updated. So it could be new contractions, because obviously you can imagine having to read the letters of every word one by one is quite time consuming, and so they have contractions built in. That means they makes it even harder for someone to learn braille in some ways, because it's not even just memorizing a letter, you've got to know what the contractions are, and it just gets updated in that way that it's more accessible to more people.
Wow. Okay, cool. I always say every day is a learning day. I genuinely like that. Just coming back to the fact that you're transcribing books, so it's going to large print or an audio version or braille. What's the process for that? So somebody just says, "I've got this book. Someone's given it to me. Can you translate it?" Is that how it works, or you go more to sort of publishers and we'll take this book and translate it?
It's to do with publishers. So publishers are generally pretty happy for people to have access to their products because they want people to read them. That's why they publish them. So we've got relationships with various Christian publishers, and that they will send us the files, and then we can get them transcribed. So people we say we never charge more than the recommended retail price of the book. So the book is £9.99 for a sighted person. It'll be £9.99 in braille. Obviously, it costs us a lot more than that, but we just don't want people to be disadvantaged in terms of what they can access. So we charge the RRP.
So we've got books into large print braille and also to audio. We've also got holidays. You talked about the Bible as well. Are there any other things that Torch Trust can do in terms of support? I mean, do you support churches, or is that something that you don't do or want to do?
No, we do that. I knew I'd forget something. You're right. So yeah, we have a project called Sight Loss Friendly Church. So if you can imagine walking into a church for the first time and you can't see, there's lots of really obvious things you can think about in terms of, well, I don't know where to go, and I don't know where the seats are, I don't know how to get a cup of coffee, but even things like, I don't know who sat next to me, I don't know if my friend is here, I don't know, kind of what I can see, I can't see anything, so I don't know what's happening. But that's if you're totally blind. But even if you're partially sighted, actually going to church can have some of that same things. Maybe you can't see peripheral, and so you can't see who's either side of you. Maybe you can't see the screen because the screen's super cool and it's got all these images and colours going on that you just can't read anymore. And there's just lots of little things that we as churches don't think about the impact on people with disability when we do them. And they're not bad things. But it's actually, how are we helping people to access the content when sight is a problem? And often people don't want to admit when they're losing their sight in a church. So they maybe won't ask for help because it feels a bit embarrassing to say, oh, I can't read that anymore. And so actually it's good to have people who are advocates saying, hey, have we as churches thought about how we're doing this and why we're doing this?
I guess in a similar way to the stereotype of somebody losing their hearing as they get older, and it's just an aging issue. Okay, you're starting to lose your hearing. I wouldn't actually have thought people are losing their sight in the same way, but because we get older, our eyes change, and actually things that are further away are harder to spot. So, yeah, well, it's not even just about helping people who can see nothing. It's about the fact that what people can see is going to change over time too.
Yeah, completely. And actually, a lot of us will end up with some form of sight loss. It's like 20% of us. I mean, mainly when we get to over 65, the percentages go up massively. But some people will have sight loss issues much younger.
I saw a little video a while back, and it was this chap who was trying to say, look, when we're talking about sight loss or visual, struggles, it's not necessarily that everything is completely blank. And he had these, was it different glasses? And all these different things like, well, this is one thing where everything's kind of fuzzy, or perhaps you've got sort of the middle view is sort of blurred or blackened out a little bit. And he was trying to explain that there's such a range of a visual ability from being able to see clearly in focus to seeing nothing. But actually, there's masses of stuff in between those two that affects lots of other people.
Yeah, completely. And that's the biggest thing I learned is I just assumed that if you're blind, you're blind. It's very, very black and white. It really isn't. There's so many shades of grey. And you also become very aware of all the visual language you use to even describe it, which is quite ironic. But most people who are registered blind would have some sight, they would have something, but it's not really meaningful. They can't really do a lot with it. They also can normally tell the difference between light and dark. So I don't know if you've ever seen a blind person wearing sunglasses and you're like, why? Well, they've still got that perception of light and dark, and actually their eyes can be more sensitive. So they still need to wear eye protection in that way. But it's a much more complicated place. It'd be so much easier if it was just, okay, you can either see or you can't. But the spectrum within that is massive.
Let's just talk a bit about your journey into Torch Trust. What's your background as a Christian? I mean, you got a church background? Was it a Paul on Damascus thing? My wife and I completely different. Mine was just I went to church and I thought, yeah, it's good. This. My wife was very much, wow, this is a spiritual thing going on and God's real. So we have very, very different experiences. So what's your background?
Yeah, so I mean, I grew up in a church-going family, but it never really seemed to mean anything as at home. It was what we did on the Sunday. I never really remember hearing the gospel growing up. And at 14, we stopped going. So yeah, parents ended up in quite a messy divorce, and so at 14, just church became, it dropped off the radar of things that we did. And because life had changed so much at that point, I ended up spending longer at school in the computer room with a girl in the year older, who's a year older than me. I mean, it dates me, doesn't it? The fact that it was a computer room at school, you can kind of, was a
We
long
had one
time
of
ago
those.
now. um, and I noticed there was one night of the week she was never there. And I was like, where are you? Where do you go this one night of the week? And she went to a Christian discussion group. And I was like, huh, well, I grew up going to church, so I'm a Christian. And went along. It didn't harm that it was joint with the boys' school, and I was at an all-girls school. So, I was a teenager. And I went there for a few months, and I always just felt kind of I'm different to these people, and I don't really know why. I don't know what the difference is. And I remember being in the car with my mum months and months later, and there was a church that had a sign outside of it that says, "If you want to know the difference in your life, ask Jesus into it." And I suddenly had a real moment of clarity of, oh, I know about Jesus. Those people know Jesus. And so I went home, made some form of commitment that night, still had quite a messy teenage years. And then when I went to university, it's when I got stuck into a church and joined the Christian Union there. And yeah, that was kind of it.
Okay, so what's your journey into Torch Trust then? That's your Christian story, if you like, but what's your journey into what you're doing now with Torch?
Yeah, hilarious, really, because yeah, when I first found out about the job, I was like, but I know nothing about disability, so why would this be the job for me? Which is a good question. But I've been since I graduated. I worked for a church for a couple of years, but the rest of the time I've been in student ministry. So working with Christian unions and universities to begin with, and then more recently working with international students who come and study. So many of them don't have the chance to hear the gospel in their home country, and then they're here, and it's like, oh, you could meet Jesus. So that's been my background. And so when this job came up, I was like, I just don't think that's for me. Um, and I was talking to someone about it, and they said, yeah, but this job is all about discipleship and evangelism. That's what you've been passionate about from the beginning. So, okay, fair. And so, yeah, that's what convinced me to apply for the job at Torch. So, not knowing much about disability, I've learnt a lot. Um, but also, it's another little subculture. So, in a way, working cross culturally with international students set me up pretty well to kind of be like, okay, this is just a different culture. What's right in this culture? What's true in this culture? What are the felt needs? How do we help these people to meet Jesus and to love him more? They're the same questions. It's just works out slightly differently.
And how we listen, how we respond.
Yeah, completely. Yeah,
So that's how you came to your job now.
yeah.
What's a day look like for you normally? I mean, it's always going to be different, but what an average day look like?
I mean, I just want to answer and say there's no such thing as an average day, but that doesn't that doesn't really answer your question, does it? Um, so let's talk about. I'll share about Monday this week. So I was in our offices, which are in Market Harborough, in Leicestershire. So as in there, we had a staff prayer meeting first thing in the morning. Did a bit of admin. Leadership team met for a bit, chatted about some things and prayed. Spent the afternoon getting things ready for our trustees meeting, but also chatting about the holiday that I'm going on next week with Torch, and talking to our client services team who get phone calls in from people after advice or wanting to borrow resources from the library and all of those sorts of things. Um, yeah, I think that's probably the main bits of the day. Yeah, so it's a real mix of people stuff. So, and that's what I love is that actually my job is all about people, and it's helping people to see Jesus in the midst of whatever they're in. So even as a staff team, we are all Christian, and so being able to meet together, to pray together, and actually on a hard day when you're just like, how is this going to happen? What's going to happen here? It's about, okay, let's pray. The Lord knows we don't need to know everything. We can trust that He is in control of whatever the situation is.
Amen to that. Those times together are so precious, aren't they, as a team?
Mm.
We really struggle because we have presenters all over the place doing different things. So we've tried for so long to find that moment when we can sit, and there isn't really one because just the way that we
Mm.
do stuff. So we have to find another way of doing things. How big a team's Torch then? You're mentioning all these different people. It
Yeah.
sounds like a really good integrated team. What sort of, how many people have you got working with you?
So there's 20 on the staff team. So there's a mixture. So there's client services, who are the people who you'll speak to if you phone Torch or email asking for something. We then have finance team who help, just make sure that we're doing things the way we should be. So finance and operations and HR, those kind of functions. We then have the bit that I got really excited about on my interview day, which is production. So it's basically a factory floor where we have multiple braille embossers, so we can produce things in different sizes for different things. Also printers for the large print things and the library. And so all of that is done on site. So when I'm in the office, it's just the other side of the door. In fact, sometimes when they turn on one of the binding machines, you can feel it, like your entire body kind of, yeah, kind of goes up and down with it. Um, yeah, and then we also have a development team who they largely work from home now. We're just trying to think how we do things differently. So one of them is currently doing a new podcast. Just actually, what does it look like to have faith as a visually impaired or blind person? We're also in the hopefully later stages of starting a chaplaincy service for people,
Wow.
and also all the audio stuff as well. So yeah, there's a lot to keep everybody busy.
It does sound lovely. I like the fact that you've basically got, I suppose, a glorified printers, really, but
Yeah,
just not what you'd necessarily find on your high street to print your dissertation or whatever. It's a little bit
yes.
different.
And it's hilarious because it's again a whole area I know nothing about. So again, I've learned a lot. Largely, it's not a printer; it's an embosser when it comes to braille. It's my main thing I've been taking away.
Cool. Sarah, thank you for sharing some of this stuff about it. I know that Dr. Trevor Stammers, who we spoke to, spoke very highly of you because he, as we were talking just off air, but he actually had complete loss from sight to completely unsighted for a period of time. Someone reached out to him from Torch Trust, and it just provided such hope in
Mm.
it's terrible language now I'm thinking about it, but in such a dark time for him, literally.
Yeah,
It was a very, very difficult time, and literally it went dark for him. So he had questions like, "Well, how do I boil a cup of tea? I,
yeah.
scalding water, I can't see. I can feel a mug, I can feel a kettle, I
Mm.
can get water in a kettle, but the bits after that, actually, this could be quite serious." And someone found some like a beepy thing that you can put in a mug,
Yeah.
so when he's filling the mug, which he could learn to do, he's not going to start pouring water all over the surface. All those sorts of stuff we don't necessarily think about, do we?
You have no idea whatsoever, and even getting dressed in the morning, you can feel a top and you can feel trousers, but you've no idea if they go. If you haven't got someone with you, then yeah, that complete loss of independence is massive.
Hmm. Thank you for what you're doing with Torch Trust. Having spoken to Trevor, just hearing the uh, how much more he relaxed he was that somebody has said, "I can help you with some of these things."
Hmm.
That is so key. And I guess that's that billboard that you saw in the same way. Actually, there's some help for you. And I guess my kind of one of my conclusions is we don't normally do these, but do you know there's always somebody to help?
Yeah.
And actually, there's always something we can do to help someone somehow.
Yeah. And quite often it's quite a little thing.
Yeah.
It's a tiny little thing. So in our office we have I think they're called bumpets or bump-ons, little hard dots that denote different things. And just this little thing like the one that has one on is always the decaf jug. Just a really simple thing you just don't think about. How else do you enable decaf or cap? It's just that straightforward. But those little things make a massive difference for someone in terms of independence.
And they just, how do people find out about Torch Trust? I'm guessing you've got a website. Can you give us that?
Yeah, sure. We are at torchtrust.org. So it's our website. It should be accessible for screen readers if anybody is needing that. But you can also email at info@torchtrust.org. And as I say, client services take phone calls every day. well, Monday to Thursday, they take phone calls. And the rest of the time, there's an answer phone, and that's on 01858 438 260.
Just give us that number one more time.
Yeah, 01858 438 260.
And people can ring up saying, help, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, and they'll get through to a lovely team who will do their best to help or direct them. Because sometimes we're not the best people to help, but we'll point you in the direction of where is.
Fabulous. Sarah from Torch Trust, thank you for your time today. I love chatting with people, and I love learning stuff that I had no concept of, like Braille is not printing, it's embossing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
The Pure newsletter comes out once a month and is designed to build up, entertain and encourage you. Sign up for our newsletter at pure247radio.org.